Important to emphasize that the findings I'm about to share are preliminary in nature and are based on initial expert assessment conducted by the Council for the Built Environment, who I have mandated to lead this investigation, alongside working with relevant provincial and municipal authorities. The Council CEO, Dr. Mieza, who joins us here today, will later further unpack these preliminary findings and the legislative framework that the CBE operates under in moments like this. However, allow me to highlight some of the key issues that have emerged thus far. Based on the information available at this point, the structure involved was a reinforced concrete multi-story building under construction comprising concrete columns, flat slabs and masonry walls. The collapse occurred while concrete was being poured, with reports indicating that work was underway on the upper levels of the building at the time of the incident. Preliminary evidence, including available video footage, points to a sudden structural failure, most likely triggered by a formwork or shuttering failure during the pumping of wet concrete. It has also been observed that substandard concrete material and substandard reinforced columns were used. It is vitally important, therefore, that we urgently track down the supplier and builder that used this material to stop this from happening anywhere else. We have been unable to do so, but we are working around the clock to track them down. Such a failure can and obviously imposes significant and abnormal dynamic loads on the floors below, loads that no building is structurally designed to withstand, resulting in a rapid and progressive collapse. Early visual assessments have also raised serious concerns regarding the quality of construction, including indications of misaligned structural elements and potentially substandard materials. Rescue personnel further reported that the concrete encountered on site appeared friable, which will require further forensic testing as part of the investigation. For those that were there, you would have noticed that the concrete was quite powdery in what we saw. Of particular concern are preliminary indications from the relevant authorities that no approved building plans were submitted, that no construction permits were issued, and that the building may have been occupied prior to the issuance of an occupational certificate, all of which would constitute serious contraventions of the national building regulations and standards. In the absence of these submissions, the relevant authorities were deprived of the opportunity to inspect, monitor, or intervene during this construction, and quite possibly they could have stopped it. The site has now been formally classified as a crime scene, and once the final operations are concluded, it will be handed over to the Department of Employment and Labour to continue with statutory investigations alongside other authorities. These preliminary findings underscore the seriousness of this incident and the importance of a thorough, coordinated investigation to establish exactly what went wrong, who is responsible, and how similar tragedies can be prevented in future. The final determination of the precise failure mechanism will be made through the detailed forensic investigation, as multiple potential contributing factors remain under examination. However, it is already clear from the preliminary findings that serious lapses occurred in the construction of this building, and these lapses will require the full investigation to get to the bottom of it. As I said on Saturday, we can never ever normalize the collapse of buildings in South Africa. It is abnormal, and we must respond with the urgency that this disaster requires. There are models for us to learn from, especially from the mining industry, which has driven a zero-tolerance approach to mine safety. We should be striving for the same in the built environment. Ladies and gentlemen, given the seriousness of the preliminary findings, the loss of life, and the clear indications of potential criminality, we have taken steps to ensure that the criminal investigation into this collapse is thorough, coordinated, and informed by prior experience. On Sunday afternoon, I formally wrote to the Minister of Police, Minister Kachalia, to request his assistance in facilitating interprovincial cooperation within the South African Police Service in relation to this investigation. Specifically, I requested that the SAP's investigative team from the Western Cape, which previously led the complex investigation into the George building collapse, be made available where appropriate to support and collaborate with the KwaZulu-Natal SAPS team responsible for the Redcliffe investigation. The purpose of this request is not to replace local investigative capacity, but to strengthen it by drawing on experience gained in a similar tragedy, particularly in navigating the technical, evidentiary, and regulatory complexes that arise in cases of major structural failures. My department, together with the Council for the Built Environment, is leading the technical investigation into the collapse and stands ready to support the SAPS in any manner required to ensure accountability, justice for affected families, and the prevention of similar incidents in the future. Where loss of life occurs as a result of possible negligence or unlawful conduct, there can be no room for delay, fragmentation, or uncertainty. Those responsible must be identified and the law must take its course. The CBE has recommended 3 immediate steps to be taken as a precautionary measure, which I fully support. They are detecting illegal building activities in municipalities across the country, requiring ready-mix concrete providers to notify building control bodies wherever large volumes of concrete are delivered to construction sites across the country to ensure that they are known to municipalities, and thirdly, launching a community-based campaign on the importance of building approvals and relevant statutory processes as part of public safety. Ladies and gentlemen, in this regard, I would like to confirm that since being alerted to this tragedy, I have continuously briefed the President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, on the building collapse and the tragic loss of life that has resulted from this incident. The President was deeply concerned and troubled by this incident, especially for the victims, their families, and all those that have been injured and affected, and he again reiterated that to me on Monday night when we last spoke. He has further received the preliminary investigation report and expressed his full support for the actions taken to date, including the steps to strengthen the criminal investigation, technical oversight, and the coordinated response across the different spheres of government. The support by the President underscores the seriousness with which this matter is being treated at the highest level of government, and the collective commitment to ensure that justice is done for the affected families and communities. The steps I've outlined include strengthening the criminal investigation, securing technical oversight, briefing to the President, are all necessary and appropriate responses to this tragedy. Anything less would not have been fitting. However, incidents such as this collapse in eThekwini compel us to look beyond individual acts of failures and to confront the systematic conditions that allow such tragedies to occur in the first place. While the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure is the custodian of the built environment at a national level, both this incident and the George building collapse have again exposed a fundamental challenge in how the built environment is regulated in South Africa. Responsibility for different aspects of building control, workplace safety, professional regulation, and enforcement is spread across multiple departments and spheres of government. When these systems do not operate in a fully coordinated manner, gaps emerge in oversight, compliance, and accountability, particularly where unlawful construction occurs or where buildings are occupied without approval. The preliminary report further notes a troubling pattern of serious structural collapses within the eThekwini metro area over more than a decade, reinforcing the need to examine whether systematic and governance failures are contributing to repeated loss of life. This is not a matter that can be addressed by any single department or sphere alone. It is an issue that requires cabinet-level consideration, informed by the outcomes of this investigation, to determine whether stronger coordinating mechanisms, clearer lines of responsibility, or regulatory reforms are required. As national government, we have a responsibility to ensure that the regulation of the built environment places public safety first. That should be the first issue that occupies our minds at all times, and that the lessons drawn from this tragedy lead to a meaningful improvement in how we prevent, detect, and respond to unlawful or unsafe construction. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my remarks, and as this investigation now picks up speed, our focus remains clear and unwavering: to support affected families and communities, to ensure full accountability, and to prevent a tragedy of this nature from occurring again. The technical, criminal, and labour-related investigations are now underway and will proceed without interference and at speed. My department, through the Council for the Built Environment, will continue to work closely with law enforcement authorities and all relevant departments to ensure that every responsible party is identified and held to account. Once investigations are concluded, we will communicate these outcomes as transparently to the public as we have done in the case of the George building collapse, while ensuring that criminal proceedings are not compromised. At the same time, the well-being of those affected remain a priority. I will leave the further details around the search and recovery operations to the MEC to deal with, and also the support that is being provided to those who perished. Before I conclude, I want to formally acknowledge and thank our disaster management teams, emergency services, and first responders who worked tirelessly under extremely difficult and dangerous conditions since Friday. In particular, I would like to thank Mr. Mzwandile Khadebe, the acting head of the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Disaster Management Centre, and his team for their leadership, coordination, and professionalism throughout the response. I also want to thank the province of KwaZulu-Natal, through MEC Reverend Tulisizwe Buthelezi, and MEC Martin Meyer for their support and response during this disaster. I also want to acknowledge the support of the eThekwini municipality through the Mayor, His Worship Cyril Kaba, for their response and leadership that they have shown during this time. Their work collectively has been critical in managing this tragedy with care, discipline, and respect for human life. I would therefore now like to invite the MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure, Honourable Martin Meyer, to brief you on the current status of operations and the support measures being implemented for families and the broader community. Thank you. MEC.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you can all hear me from there. Thank you so much, Minister.
Do you want to move it across?
The Mayor, City Manager. Let's just quickly get these. There we go. And yes, it's indeed tragic. And I think when it is something like this, where it is a building of a faith institution, the result of what happened goes right well past just the borders of here. It goes across the world, and the whole faith community is now in mourning. And we are very cognizant of that fact. So just as the background, on the 12th of December, as you know, at approximately 12:30, a four-story structure under construction collapsed onto the existing Hindu temple, resulting in multiple entrapments beneath heavy concrete and steel. Upon notification of the collapse, the following agencies immediately responded: eThekwini Fire and Rescue, SABC Search and Rescue, eThekwini Metro Police, Gift of the Givers, the Provincial EMRS Network, Netcare 911, IPSS Medical Rescue, Reaction Unit South Africa, PDMC Head and Fire and Rescue Unit, City Engineers, and the Department of Employment and Labour, which also shows why it's important for both the private sector, and we are very grateful for their assistance, and the public sector to work together in a crisis like this. Key interventions were also provided by His Excellency, the Mayor of eThekwini, Mayor Cyril Kaba, the public and private organisation search and rescue teams, the Western Cape search and rescue team on site, for which we as a province are eternally grateful for their assistance, deployment of structural engineers to access stability before deep rescue, the utilisation of heavy machinery and drones to support search operations, establishment of on-site incident command, NDMC on site, the Engineering Council of South Africa on site to provide technical advice and investigations, and the Council for the Built Environment, or CBE, and the Construction Industry Development Board, CIDB, are on site. We also know that there were great or large political involvement through visits from Minister Dean Macpherson, my colleague MEC Buthelezi, myself, and Mayor Kaba, as well as the Honourable Premier, who visited not only the site but also with affected families and families of the deceased. So casualties, as the latest update, 5 fatalities have been confirmed. Several individuals have been rescued with minor to moderate injuries. 6 injuries have been reported. 4 patients transported to Sindisiweni Hospital, whilst 2 to Victoria Hospital. Operational challenges that the search and rescue teams faced was unstable structural elements posing risk of secondary collapse, extensive reinforcement of steel and concrete slowing penetration efforts, limited access due to the structure being located on a cliffside, and difficulties in accounting for all workers on site due to a lack of a register that could be followed. Initially, the scene was handed over to the incident commander, Mr. Mate from eThekwini Fire and Rescue Services, and then subsequently to Warrant Officer Francois Pretorius of the SABC Search and Rescue, since it was switched from a rescue to a recovery operation. Currently, it has now been handed over to the Department of Employment and Labour since recoveries have been done. The Department of Health provided essential services including post-mortem examinations, DNA testing and other medico-legal support services. SAPS assisted with the identification of the deceased individuals and coordinated related forensic procedures. The DEL issued a prohibition, the Department of Labour issued a prohibition notice on the 12th of December 2025, instructing the property owner not to remove, alter or to enter the collapsed structure. Furthermore, all state entities within the built environment sector has been directed to support investigation. This directive was issued by the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Minister Dean Macpherson, following his visit on the 13th of December. Burial support services were provided by eThekwini. As to our record, one burial has already happened, with the other 4 happening soon. And we are grateful to eThekwini Metro to provide burial support services to ensure dignified funerals to the deceased, as well as the Department of Social Development, providing psychosocial support to affected families, including counselling services to those who are grieving. We also want to thank, because as I said previously, this goes far beyond just the borders of Verulam or eThekwini. Our office, my office, was also contacted by the Consul General of the Republic of India, who has also offered their assistance, and they are now assisting with the family members of those who are left behind and those who are deceased. So we can also now say that the rescue and recovery operation has now been ceased. All our teams are off-site. It has now been handed over to the Department of Labour and is now a site for criminal investigation. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Let me over to you.
Program Director, Mr. Lennox Mabaso, Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Dean Macpherson, MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Martin Meyer, the City Manager and the Planning Team, Dr. Mieza for the Council of Built Environment and his team, and all government officials present, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. As the leadership of the city, we welcome the report tabled by the Minister. While this is a preliminary report, it shed light on critical issues that enable citizens to better understand the possible causes of this tragic incident. The report has effectively put an end to speculation surrounding the matter. We can now speak with authority, guided by the findings of a thorough investigation that has been conducted so far. I want to assure the people of eThekwini that we will continue to support the technical team tasked with investigating the matter to ensure that the process is expedited and that the final report is released without delay. When this accident occurred, all spheres of government responded swiftly, deploying police, search and rescue teams, disaster management, as well as emergency services. We would like to express our sincere appreciation to everyone who worked tirelessly around the clock to ensure that all individuals trapped in the building were accounted for. We note the findings contained in the report and commit ourselves to implementing it to the letter, all recommendations. Such incidents have no place in our city and must never be allowed to happen again. As the leadership, will support all efforts aimed at ensuring that those responsible are brought to book. This will send a strong message to would-be culprits that any similar transgressions will be met with the full might of the law. Finally, on behalf of the city, I convey our deepest condolences to the families of the deceased and wish those who were injured a speedy recovery. Let me add this, that between the year 2022 and 2023, we received 2 building plans from the trustees of the farm. Let me add this, that the farm is 8.5 hectares in extent, and both applications were refused because the land on which construction was proposed was zoned as a conservation reserve. I also want to confirm that the 4-story building was erected without the necessary approvals from eThekwini municipality, and the unauthorized work was not observed during the course of construction, and therefore no inspections were carried out. Ordinarily, when we pick up unauthorized building works happening, we issue a contravention notice, and then the remedial order. Because we couldn't pick this up earlier, so we could do none of this. So that's all I can confirm so far. But for technical details, whatever it may be, we, like the minister said, we have Dr. Mieza, the CEO of the Council for Built Environment, as well as our city manager. We have brought the entire planning leadership to be with us today. That's all I can confirm for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are just going to allow the technical teams to just briefly explain a few technical details. We start with the CEO of the CID of the CBE, the Council for the Built Environment, which actually is an entity that is responsible for all the professionals in the built environment that are always found on construction site. We'll then move to the CIDP, the Construction Industry Development Board, and then the city manager, and then we'll take the questions and answer session in that order. Thank you.
Program Director, thank you very much, Babaso. Let me acknowledge the ministers present, Dean Macpherson, MEC, Mayor, His Worship the Mayor, Webster Baba, City Manager of eThekwini, my colleagues. I also want to, on behalf of the CBE, convey our sincere condolences to the families that lost their loved ones. Like the Minister said, in 2025, we should not be discussing buildings that are collapsing in South Africa. We just went through the George experience, and today we are here. Minister and members of the media, I have been given a responsibility to unpack some of the prelim findings that we are making in our report. And I want to underscore the point that these findings must be understood strictly for situational analysis or awareness, and they will also inform us on the steps that we must take moving forward in relation to the formal inquiry that has commenced. Mr. Mayor, I just want to highlight some of the issues that I think should concern us as a collective in the built environment and the construction industry as a whole. Over the past decade, we have observed some of the structural failures in the city of eThekwini. Just to paint a picture, in 2011, a house at 37 Avoka Road, which had no approved plan, collapsed during the construction. In November 2013, the Tongati Mall collapsed during the construction. In March 2018, a building collapsed in Jacobs. In June 2020, a building collapsed in the CBD of eThekwini. In January 2025, a structure collapsed in Tongati near the King Shaka Airport. In March 2025, a building collapsed in Phoenix while it was under construction. In June 2025, construction site collapsed in Springfield. And now in December, Verulam Temple collapsed. Surely, as the industry and the sector in the built environment, those numbers are concerning to us, and hence we are making the call that something has to be done speedily. In our investigation that will be undertaken, it will be structured in 3 parts. The first part will look at the technical aspect of it, which will be really around the professional design, supervision, and monitoring. The second part will look at regulatory compliances, because I think the picture that I've painted indicate that there might be systematic and governance issues that requires our attention. The third part relates to the actual construction conduct, because clearly there might be issues in the construction sector, and I think Mr. Bongani will deal with some of the aspect around the construction issues. I think it is important, while the political leadership has given a broad overview on how this incident happened, is to contextualize the role that we play as the CBE in relation to the built environment. I'll just cite 3 areas, just so that at least there is context. Through the Minister of Public Works, using the CBE Act, our responsibility is to facilitate interministerial cooperation concerning issues that impact the built environment. The second issue relates to undertaking investigation of this nature. The third issue relates to, once we've undertaken the investigation, we must advise government on measures that should be implemented, similar to what we have done in George, and those recommendations are currently being processed through government structures. As part of the Redcliffe collapse, we activated our emergency protocol to develop a report that we are tabling here today, which basically mandates us that within 72 hours we must develop a report, submit to the minister can then advise government and the president on the measures we are taking, while parallel to that the investigation is being undertaken. There are 3 gates, and I think it's important to note that in the construction sector, or especially in relation to multi-story buildings, there are 3 gates that one must go through. And these gates are predetermined by the National Building Regulations and Building Standards, which basically outline the process on what you must do prior construction in a structure. The second part relates to occupational health and safety, which determine the process associated with the activities in the construction space. Just to indicate what Gate 1 entails without getting into details, it basically mandates that no building will be constructed or must be constructed without getting an approval from the local authority. Gate number 2 indicate that no person can start constructing a structure without getting a notice from the local authority to proceed. And gate number 2 also in relation to OSHA Act is to receive a work permit from Department of Labour that empowers you to commence the construction. And gate 3 is the one that is important, that confirms that the structure that was constructed is legit and can be occupied by residents and it can be used. Those are the 3 gates that are important. Obviously, what the mayor has actually presented is that these processes were contravened. So in our findings from the report, we make 13 recommendations or findings or observations at this point in time. But for the purpose of simplicity, Mr. Mabaso, I will just categorize them into 4 categories. The first finding that we make broadly relates to contravention and non-compliance to legislation governing the built environment and construction. We can confirm that indeed the structure was a 4-story building. Obviously, it did not go through any of the gates that I've outlined earlier. Secondly, it contravened all the legislative prescript that governs the building of such structures. We can also conclude, as the mayor of eThekwini confirmed, that the work that was undertaken on that site was unlawful, unauthorized, unsupervised, and illegal. The second finding that we are making relates to the substandard material and the construction methods that we think were happening on that site. We have established that when the building collapsed, they were undertaking the pouring of cement on the top levels. Obviously, based on the samples that we've taken, we can indicate tentatively that there were no vibrators that were used to ensure proper compaction and to avoid that air entrapment does not occur. From the samples, we could see that there were voids in the samples that we took, which basically weakened the concrete. The second finding relates to, which I think the minister covered, the structural material used was powdery, which in our view relates to the quality of material used on site. And the sample from the lab test that we also conducted confirmed that the standard of concrete used did not meet the acceptable standards that are prescribed in our legislation. The third finding that we are making broadly relates to formwork. I think in most cases when building collapse, will collapse because of the pouring of cement that would be happening at the time. In this instance, the slab upon which formwork was being undertaken collapsed. The second issue relates to inadequate design of the assembly that was actually observed on site. The third issue relates to inadequate backdrop, which provides support during when concrete that is wet is being poured on the slab. And the last one relates to the slab that when you increase the load, it's likely to put pressure as such that building collapse within a space of a minute. And I think those are some of the factors that we think would have led to the collapse in relation to the quality and the formwork. The last finding that we are making relates to the slab and concrete frames. The concrete frames that we found that they were typically a palm concrete mix in terms of consistency. However, the slabs that we saw on site appeared to be very thin, inadequately reinforced, and not very robust. The target strength for the slab would probably have been between the 25 and 30 megapixels. This will be confirmed, obviously, once we embark on a detailed investigation with the ready-mix supplier, which was providing the services on site. However, in our professional view, we believe that when pressure was exerted during the pouring of concrete is it what led to the failure of this building, because the columns could not sustain the pressure on site. So those are the 4 findings broadly that we are making at this point in time, but broadly speaking, there are only 13 in total. The last part that I want to cover briefly, Mr. Mabaso, relates to the terms of the investigative inquiry. The minister briefly touched on, but I just want to unpack what will those 3 components entail. One will relate to technical investigation, where we'll deal with structural engineering and compliance issues. The second part will relate to governance and regulatory inquiry based on some of the trends that I've spoken to at the beginning. And the last part will be really about analysis of systematic and structural weaknesses and provide recommendation that can be implemented across the country. As a way forward, I do want to state, Program Director, that CPE will lead the technical investigation working with other colleagues from Labour and SAPS and the City of eThekwini. The criminal investigation will leave that to the criminal authorities. The Minister also has confirmed that there are immediate steps that we've put forward which will also be implemented across government, and those relate to illegal buildings and engaging with the suppliers of building material, as well as support the community campaign that will be led by different spheres of government to ensure that we deal with public safety in the construction industry. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much. Dr. Meza moves will allow the chair of the CIDB. I'm requesting the city manager to come also join this side quickly.
Honorable Minister, MEC, Honorable Your Excellency, the Mayor, and then the City Manager. Thank you, colleagues. On the immediate steps that will be taken, we, as much as included in the Minister's statement, with a nationwide campaign around illegal buildings, we also intend making use of our site employees who can play a critical role in early detection points for potential disasters, to include as a mandatory requirement in the day-to-day site briefings that they receive on health and safety, to also identify, go beyond compliance, to look at unusual warning signs for such, because these colleagues that are on construction sites are there every day. They can look at issues such as unusual cracks, vibration, water ingress, structural movement, and other faults that could be found in construction sites. And this will help us to have clearer reporting line for early detection for all the stakeholders involved, ranging from local municipalities, provincial, and also national. This will be an important contribution to ensuring health and safety in construction sites, because there were many markers, as our colleagues have indicated, that could have assisted for early detection before it became a disaster of this nature. So as the Construction Industry Development Board, we will work with other stakeholders to ensure that that happens. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. As we welcome the city manager, and then we get ready to move to the Q&A. I'm sure by the time we leave here, we'll all be experts in the built environment industry with the jargons and the lexicons of the sector that have been shared here today. Over to you, Sia.
Thank you very much. Greetings to the Minister, the MEC, His Worship the Mayor, colleagues, the members of the media who are with us this morning. I think a lot has been covered, but I think there are certain facts that I need to state in addition to what my principals have raised. One is that there are about 6 buildings just on that site that were approved by the city. The occupancy certificates were also issued for those buildings to be used in accordance with the approved building plans. So that really reflects a duty of care on the city's side. Because the developers were very compliant, we were very surprised this time around why they went on to build a building under the cover of secrecy and do it within a period of about 4 to 6 months and evade our capability to inspect. Given the fact that the site is located, it is couched within the conservation area, and it is zoned rural residential. So under normal circumstances, you wouldn't expect a lot of illegal activities to spring up in a setup like that, as opposed to the built-up dense environment. And the only conclusion we can come up with is that whilst they were compliant in the other buildings, they were compliant in the other buildings. On this one, it's because they were already encroaching into what we call Durban Metropolitan Open Space System, the DMOS, which is a conservation area that no one is permitted to build in, except that there is a very strict approval process that will be followed, including consulting our biodiversity branch, including consulting the environmental authorities in the province. So that is quite a cumbersome process. We can only assume that one, because it is so cumbersome, they probably found a very easy way out. So it's important to state those particular facts. But what I need to state and correct, lest it perpetuates a problematic narrative, I don't think that we must, unless if there is evidence that points to a systematic governance collapse in the city, leading to the collapse of the buildings, we'll be prepared to take that. As I'm saying, that in that particular site, there are 6 buildings already that went through our radar. So I've seen something in the media which